Vriende, net voor ons verder gaan, net 'n herinnering aan die geleentheid nou komende Vrydagoggend by Kleinbaai. Please bring along a folding chair. That will make it easier. You can sit, of course, you can sit on the sand, but maybe it's much more comfortable to have a seat. So if you have a folding chair, bring that along. And we'll have a short service there. Willem will be there meeting us. Vriende, ek wil vanmôre hierdie boodskap begin deur vir julle te neem na 'n plek nie ver hier vandaan nie. As jy nou hier verby die waterfront ry, dan kom jy daar naby Seepunt. Near Greenpoint, Sea Point. There's a church over there. Dit is die NG Kerk in 3 Anker Baai. Ek weet nie wie van julle was al daar gewees nie, 3 Anker Baai. En in die tuin van daardie gemeente is 'n spesiale boom geplant. And when you walk through this congregation's garden, you'll see that, well, not this one, because this one is something like the one that's planted over there, but I'll explain that right now in the coming few minutes. Next to the church building, you come upon a tree. It's an olive tree like the one on the screen. And there's a bronze plate, a kennisgewing bord wat op die boom aangebring is. And the inscription on the bronze plate says the following: that this tree had its origin in the Garden of Gethsemane in Israel. Dis nie duidelik of hulle daar 'n steggie geneem het van daardie boom, 'n takkie afgesny het of hoe dit presies werk nie. Maar dis duidelik die oorsprong van die boom hier kom van ver af. Dit kom van die Midde-Ooste af. Dit kom van Israel af. Dis nie sommer 'n plaaslike olyfboompie nie. It's a olive tree, small olive tree that has been transplanted over here next to the church building. It was planted there in 1984, the bronze plate says. And the person who planted is not someone from the church, strange enough. It's the administrator of the province of Good Hope. The province of Good Hope, as the Cape province was known in those days. And this administrator's name was Gene Lowe, a well-known politician of those days, who later on became cabinet minister of several departments, one after the other, until we became a democratic republic. But come to think of it, the olive tree has a story of its own. It reminds us of the garden at the base of the Mount of Olives, where Jesus prayed and asked his Father, if possible, to let the cup of suffering pass from him. And it was there in the same garden in Gethsemane where Judas came to Jesus and betrayed him with a kiss. It reminds us, when you look at the tree over on this side, in 3 Anker Baai, that the story of our faith, the Christian faith, comes from a far-off place. And this particular tree at Sea Point, on the grounds of the church, reminds us of how faith and ordinary life, how they are intertwined with each other. How politics and religion influence one another, especially in those days. How many of us grew up in a church that had a favorable place in society, whilst other churches were battling for survival. There were some churches who were in favor. Dis nie 'n storie sonder probleme nie. Ons voel spanning aan as ons so hierna luister. En dan is die vraag, is dit 'n goeie daad om 'n boom op 'n ver plek te neem en dit te kom oorplant op 'n nuwe plek, 'n vreemde plek? Hoort die boom hier? Kan dit hier groei? Kan dit hier vrug dra? It does not look like the tree over here thrives at all. It's 40 years old. It has been planted in 1984. But it's only 2 meters tall. It's not that large, that high. And I'm told that when you come to this tree now, you'll see that there are ribbons attached to it. Multicolored ribbons. But they are faded now. Because the people of the congregation put those ribbons there shortly after COVID in 2020, because they commemorated with doing that by hanging the multicolored robes on the tree, that the Lord has been with them, that the Lord has provided in difficult times, that the Lord extended His hand of grace to a particular faith community over here in Gemeenskapkerk and all over the world. But it's faded now. Does it still make sense? Maak dit nog sin? Maak dit nog saak om die Here te dien? Kan jy agterkom, as jy so na hierdie storie van my luister, dan weet ons die boom is 'n beeld. Die boom word 'n metafoor. Die predikant daar in Gemeenskapkerk is Andri Silje, the current minister of religion there is Andri Silje. And he applies this image of the tree as a metaphor for our faith in God. He was the author of that book, Onder die blare dak, verwonderd oor die gawe om te kan glo. He says, our faith resembles a tree. As jy dink aan jou eie geloof, as 'n klein boompie wat gegroei het, wat geplant is en wat begin groei het. Samuel Wolleben said the following. He said, under the canopy of the trees, daily dramas and moving love stories are played out. Dink aan die drama in jou eie lewe, waardeur jy al gegaan het. Jy en jou geliefde langs jou, jy of jou geliefdes wat jou lewe, deel is van jou lewe. He says, our faith in God is like a tree. It comes from somewhere. It has been transplanted here in our hearts, in this place, in this province, here in South Africa. Our faith is like a tree that has its roots in the South African soil. And to what extent has it adapted here? It has a structure. There's a trunk. There's branches. There's leaves. Hopefully there's fruit for the birds of the area. And similarly, my faith has a structure. Think of the church we belong to here in the community church, the Gemeenskapkerk. The faith we practice from day to day, from week to week. The way we gather, how we worship, how we care for each other, how we impact the community, the effect our faith has on our day-to-day lives. Every tree has its own story. Every tree has its own truth. Truth in the sense that it represents something that is worthwhile to consider, worthwhile to study. That is what truth is, something worthwhile to think about, to study, to think what it is, to see how it works. And in the same manner, Jesus himself has his own truth. Truth, yeah, in the sense that he conveys something in himself that is of value. In Afrikaans sal ons vra, wat is die waarheid van elke mens? Solie, wat is die waarheid van jou en van jou kinders? Jy gaan nou môre vertrek, jy gaan nou verlang, gaan jy kuier by jou vriende op ver plekke, by jou kinders op ver plekke. Wat is die waarheid van Solie en van jou vrou wat oorlede is, en van julle kinders en die lewe wat hulle nou maak op 'n ander plek? Wat is die waarheid van Jesus? Elke mens, ek en jy het iets uniek in onsself. Net soos Jesus iets waardevol, iets uniek, iets betroubaar in homself omgedra het. And this is what we want to do this morning, is to, what is the English word? To ascertain, om vast te stel, to do some research, to make sure, what does Jesus represent? What is the truth of Jesus? What is worthwhile? Wat is waardevol aan Jesus? Now, to go to the Word of God will be very enlightening. Kom ons doen dit. Jesus had a conversation with the Roman governor. And you know what his name was? Pontius Pilate. And in that conversation, Jesus had two things to point out. One, his divine origin, Jesus' divine origin, and then Jesus' ministry. Let's take a look at John 18. We read from verse 12. Then the Roman soldiers, with their commanding officer and the Jewish guards, arrested Jesus, bound him, and took him first to Annas. He was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was high priest that year. It was Caiaphas who had advised the Jewish authorities that it was better that one man should die for all the people. The high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and about his teaching. And after that, Annas sent him, still bound, to Caiaphas, the high priest. Nou, dit was hier by Caiaphas, waar Simon Petrus langs die vuurtjie gestaan het. Hy het soetjies agter Jesus aangegaan met die soldate wat hom gevang het, om vasgebind het. En hy het in die skaduwee van die bome saamgegaan tot by die woning van Caiaphas. And it was there that Jesus denied, Simon Peter denied Jesus 3 times. And then, you know what happened. Die haan het gekraai. Hier by Caiaphas se huis was dit Petrus wat gesê het, nee, ek ken nie vir Jesus nie, wie is hy? En dan soos 'n speelbal word Jesus rondgestuur van die een na die ander. Early in the morning, Jesus was taken from Caiaphas' house to the governor's place. The Jewish authorities did not go inside the palace, for they wanted to keep themselves ritually clean in order to be able to eat the Passover meal. And what Pontius Pilate did was, he came out to them to speak to the Jewish religious leaders. And he said to them, then you yourselves, take this person, take this man, referring to Jesus, and try him according to your own law. They replied, we are not allowed to put anyone to death. So hulle het al klaar in hulle harte, hulle self voorgeneem. Jesus moet doodgaan. Hy moet sterf. Hy moet uit die pad geruim word. Pilate went back into the palace and called Jesus. He asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews? Are you the king of the Jews?" Nou kom ons hou in gedagte hoekom Pilatus hierdie vraag vra. Dit klink so uit die bloute of Pilatus nou vir Jesus vra, "Is jy die koning van die Jode?" Nou waar kom Pilatus daaraan? Om Paasfees te kan vier, het duisende Jode uit die omliggende dorpe in Palestina jaarliks na Jerusalem gestroom om deel te hê aan die Paasfees. And it was a matter of concern for the authorities, because the influx of large numbers of people could easily lead to an uprising against the Roman occupiers of the area. And that is why they amassed a strong presence of Roman soldiers in Jerusalem, the city where Passover was celebrated in the temple. Ons moet onthou dat Israel was nie onder selfregering gewees nie. Die Romeine het die plek geannexeer. En die Romeine het leiersfigure, het politiese figure in plek gesit om die staat te regeer en 'n oogie oor hulle te hou. Om die Romeinse reg, die Romeinse juk af te druk op die mense. And that is why two important key players came to Jerusalem as well during the festivities, which lasted for 8 days. And those two people were Pontius Pilate and King Herod Antipas. Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor of Judea, represented the Roman emperor, Tiberius. His name was Tiberius. And he sat over there in Rome, far from there. But Pontius Pilate was his representative, the local person who was responsible to govern the area. And usually Pilate had his residence in Caesarea, a city to the north, 88 kilometers from Jerusalem. And he traveled downwards towards Jerusalem to be present during the Passover. Not because he celebrated Passover, but just to be there with his soldiers to keep an eye on what was happening. The second key player was King Herod Antipas, one of the sons of King Herod. And King Herod Antipas came from the north as well. He had his palace in Tiberias. It's more or less, say, 100 kilometers from Jerusalem, in Galilee to the north. He was one of the sons of King Herod. And this father of him, can you remember who was King Herod? The well-known King Herod, who was responsible, how long ago? 30 years before, for the massacre of all male children, 2 years old and under, in and around Bethlehem, where Jesus was born. So that was the ugly face of this King Herod the Great. And one of his sons was Antipas, Herod Antipas. And when King Herod died, the area was divided in 4 pieces. And one of those pieces one of those provinces was given to King Herod Antipas. He was the king of the provinces of Galilee and Perea. And he was the person who was responsible for the death of a well-known person by the name John the Baptist. He ordered the beheading, die onthoofding van Johannes die Doper. Cruel people in charge. And both of them traveled to Jerusalem. They were present there. And Pontius Pilate and Herod Antipas represented the political power players. They traveled to Jerusalem in those days and stayed close. They stayed close to each other, not far from the temple, in the palace of Herod. I don't know which of you has been to Israel. I haven't been there, but as I understand it, the palace of Herod is just around the corner from the temple. Let me show you this map. When you look at this map, you see what's happening here now. Here's Jerusalem, and the high priests Annas and Caiaphas, plus the Sanhedrin, all those people were present here in Jerusalem. It was a religious center because the temple was in Jerusalem. Die Sanhedrin, die skrifgeleerdes, die fariseërs, hulle almal was daar saamgetrek. En hulle het een gedagte gehad, en dit was om vir Jesus dood te maak. So, as I told you, Pontius Pilate traveled to the south from Caesarea Maritima. Maritima means next to the sea. Caesarea next to the sea. And then King Herod Antipas came from Tiberias in the north. And he, next to the Sea of Galilee, and he traveled southwards as well. There was another Caesarea, a different Caesarea from that one. Caesarea Maritima, and there was Caesarea Philippi, the palace of King Philip, the Tetrarch. He was a half-brother of Herod Antipas, and those people were responsible for the 4 different regions of this area after King Herod died. Right. So those 2 strong, important people traveled to Jerusalem. And what happened just before, a week before Passover? Who traveled to Jerusalem as well? Jesus. Jesus entered Jerusalem on what we know as Palm Sunday, which is today, what we are celebrating today. Op Palm Sondag is hy in die stadspoorte van Jerusalem verwelkom. En mense het die palmtakke van die bome afgeskeer en afgesny, en hulle klere op die grond gesit, and Jesus came into Jerusalem riding on the back of a horse? No, a humble donkey. Not like a military victor, but a humble servant. And the people shouted. They shouted, and it's recorded in Matthew 21. Hosanna to the Son of David. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest. Expectations ran high because the people said, here's the successor of King David. Maybe he's the king. Maybe he's the one who will be able to chase the Romans out of Jerusalem and out of our country. En waarskynlik het Pontius Pilatus en Herodes Antipas kennis geneem van hierdie persoon wat potensieel 'n groot aanhang het wat in Jerusalem ingekom het en vir die mense gesê het, Hosanna vir die seun van Dawid. And that is why why Pontius Pilate asked Jesus, are you the king of the Jews? Are you the king of the Jews? And Jesus answered, do you say this of your own accord, or did others say to you about me? Pilate answered, am I a Jew? Your own nation, the chief priests, have delivered you over to me. What have you done? Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting that I might not be delivered over to the Jews. But my kingdom is not from the world." And then Pilate said to him, "So you are a king." Nou, sy koppie haak daar vas. Hy wil net dit hoor. "So you are a king." Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. For this purpose I was born, and for this purpose I have come into the world, to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice." And Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" Hier is nou 'n geleentheid dat Jesus vir Pilatus kan sê wat waarheid is. And after he said this, without further ado, without giving Jesus the opportunity to speak to him, he turned his back on Jesus. He went back outside to the Jews and told them, "I find no guilt in him." Ek moet oor die waarheid getuienis aflê. Hiervoor is ek gebore. Hiervoor het ek na die wêreld toe gekom. Elkeen wat aan die waarheid behoort, luister na wat ek sê. Wat is waarheid, sê Pilatus vir hom. En toe hy dit sê, gaan hy weer uit na die Jode toe en sê vir hulle, ek vind geen skuld in hom nie. In that conversation, friends, Jesus wanted to point out two things, his divine origin and his ministry. Jesus said, what is my origin is, I was born, I came into the world. And we know he did that by taking human nature upon himself. He was God born as a human person. His origin from God, but he took on a human body. And his ministry? To bear witness to the truth. Dit is waarvoor Jesus na die wêreld toe gekom het, vir 'n sekere doel, om oor die waarheid getuienis af te lê. Maar dit ons gesê is waarheid, dit wat waardevol is, dit wat saak maak, to explain to the people that which is worthwhile to consider, dit wat saak maak. And Pilate asked Jesus, what is truth? Wat is waarheid? And without waiting for an answer, went outside, told the Jews that he find no guilt, doesn't find any grounds for charging Jesus for any crime. And according to Luke 23, it's not recorded in John, but in Luke 23, Pilate even sent Jesus to King Herod Antipas, who was in Jerusalem as well, as I explained. And after a few questions were asked to Jesus, not really questions that matter, Herod Antipas sent Jesus back to Pontius Pilate again. And then Pilate asked him, he said to Jesus, where are you from? Jesus has just explained to him where he's from, but he doesn't understand it. Jesus gave him no answer. So Pilate said to him, you will not speak to me? Do you not know that I have authority to release you and authority to crucify you? Hy speel bietjie baas hierso. Hy probeer hier sy mag wys vir Jesus. Jesus answered him, you would have no authority over me at all, unless it had been given you from above. Therefore, he who delivered me over to you has the greatest sin. And from then on, Pilate sought to release him. Interessant, né? Pilate kan aanvoel, Jesus, daar's nie skuld in Jesus nie. But the Jews cried out, if you release this man, you are not Caesar's friend. Dan is jy nie die keiser se vriend nie. Everyone who makes himself a king, like Jesus does, opposes Caesar. So when Pilate heard these words, het daar 'n ommekeer in hom gekom. He brought Jesus out and sat down on the judgment seat at the place called the stone pavement, and in Aramaic, Gabbatha. Now it was the day of preparation of the Passover. It was about the 6th hour. He said to the Jews, behold your king. And they cried out, away with him, crucify him. Pilate said to them, shall I crucify your king? The chief priests answered, we have no king but Caesar. So he delivered him over to them to be crucified. Vriende, dit is duidelik dat Pilatus se gesprek met Jesus net rondom een ding gedraai het. Mag. It was power, authority, which dominated the thoughts of Pilate. Pilate was trying to determine, is my position, my career in danger here? Is this really a king? Will he be able to subvert me? I must test that. To whom should I listen? Does he pose a threat to me or to the interests of Rome? Must I listen to the religious leaders of the Jews who are pressing for the crucifixion of Jesus? To whom must I listen? What voice must I listen to? Must I listen to the voice of my wife who warned me not to have anything to do with Jesus, the righteous man who was brought before me? Onthou julle, Pilatus se vrou het mos gedroom die vorige nag. En sy stuur toe 'n boodskap vir Pontius en sê, jy moet nie iets te doen hê met hierdie man nie. Hy's regverdig. Should he listen to the crowd who chose Barabbas as the one who should be freed? Pilatus het mos vir hulle keuse gegee. Wie kies julle, Barabbas of Jesus? Toe sê hulle, Barabbas, free him, crucify Jesus. The crowd that warned him, Pilate, not to do anything that would make him an opponent of Caesar. Could Pilate trust his own common sense? Should he listen to Jesus? It all boils down to this question, who can he trust? What is the voice he should listen to? For the sake of his career, his position, his future, and he decided, supreme power belongs to Caesar, to the emperor. And it is power that determines what is true and what is not true. And that is why Pilate chose the emperor, and he chose against Jesus. Vriende, wat is waarheid? Is waarheid, Aby, dit wat jy dink die waarheid is? Of is waarheid dit wat Jaco sê die waarheid is? Is it a matter of opinion? Is waarheid maar net opinies van mense? Dan sou mens miskien kon sê, dit is die man met die grootste mag, die mens with the most authority, who can determine what is true and what not. Mense met mag wat hulle opinies afdwing op ander. Wie is reg in Suid-Afrika? Watter party is reg? Is dit die sterkste party, die party wat die meeste stemme kan kry, die meeste ondersteuning het? As jy mag het, dan is jou mening baie keer in hierdie wêreld die waarheid. Pilate asked Jesus, what is truth? And as a matter of fact, Jesus answered him. Jesus said in verse 37, everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice. Elkeen wat aan die waarheid behoort, luister na wat ek sê. As jy wil weet wat is waarheid, dan moet jy luister na wat Jesus sê. Jesus spreek waarheid. In other words, truth is not something I possess. It's the other way around. Truth wants to possess us. There it is. Truth wants to be in control of us. So here's Jesus' question to us this morning. Do you, my people, do you, my brothers and sisters, live and act as if the truth belongs to us? Or do you belong to the higher truth, to Jesus, who wants to guide you through His Spirit in what is true? Not first, most what you think, what you sense is correct, but what in His eyes is the truth. And He wants us to guide us in that. Okay? Whose voice do we listen to when we act as if the truth belongs to us? As die waarheid aan my behoort, na wie se stem luister ek? Na my eie stem, my own voice. We listen to our own voice, and when we do that, it becomes difficult. It becomes impossible to hear another's voice, whether that voice is human or whether that voice is divine. Mike Marsh is a priest in an Episcopal church in Texas. And he wrote an amazing sermon on John 18, verse 37. He said, when we make ourselves custodians of the truth, when we believe that truth belongs to us, then we listen to our own voice and the voices of those who think and act like us. We listen to the voice of our political party, our country, our religion, our faction. We listen to the voice of our fear and security. That becomes the truth of my life, my fears, my insecurities. We listen to the voice of our prejudice, ons vooroordeel, our individual needs and desires, our experience. Is hierdie dinge dan nie belangrik nie? Yes, it is. I know those voices, says Mike Marsh. I've heard, I've listened to them. I know they are real. And they do speak a truth. But it is only a piece of the truth. They remind me that the world is not always safe. And life is not always easy. But I also know this. There's another voice. A voice that speaks from a kingdom not of this world. Vriende, as ons terugkyk na al hierdie stemme waarna ons luister, na ons eie stem, dan die stem van ons eie vrese en onsekerhede, ons eie vooroordele. We must realize there's a different voice, a voice that speaks from a kingdom not of this world, the voice of Christ. So when uncertainty and fear and terrorist attacks come to us, there's a voice that says, do not fear, I'm with you. Do not be afraid, for I'm your God. I will strengthen you, I will help you, I will uphold you with my victorious right hand. Isaiah 41. And remember, I'm with you all the days to the end of the age. Matthew 28. When I experience the darkness of death, there's a voice that says, I am the resurrection, and the life. Those believe in me, even though they die, will live. John 11. When I struggle in a sea of human diversity, of different people, different genders, different opinions, people who think, act, believe differently than us, there's a voice that says, you shall love that neighbor of yours. You should love your neighbor as yourself, even though they differ from you. When we are drawn into a world with battle lines drawn and the enemies named, there's a voice that says, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Dis 'n moeilike een. During humanitarian need all around us, there's a voice that says, I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. Matthew 25. In the pain of a broken heart, in the pain of hurt feelings and betrayals, have you been there? Are you there right now, experiencing a broken heart, hurt feelings, betrayal of one kind or another? Then there's a voice that says, if anyone has a complaint against one another, forgive each other. Forgive each other, just as the Lord has forgiven you. Can you see, friends, in every time, in every place, in every situation, there's always the other voice. The other voice. That other voice speaking to us. And it speaks in today's world. It speaks in your life. It speaks in my life. And that's the voice I want to listen to. That's the truth to which I want to belong. That's the truth to which I want to belong. I want to belong to the one speaking. Ek wil luister na die een wat aan die woord is, na Jesus. That's the life I want to live. Vriende, ek dink aan daardie teks wat sê in Johannes 14 vers 6, ek is die weg en die waarheid en die lewe. Jesus sê, ons kan die Jesus waarheid ken, want hy sê ek is die waarheid. We can be trained, we can be disciplined to discern his voice from all the other voices. And as we listen to his voice, the more we'll know the truth of Jesus. But Jesus is not only the truth, he's the way and the life as well. Therefore, we cannot know the truth of Jesus without walking the way of Jesus and without living the life of Jesus. Jesus vra dat ons hele lewe sal oriënteer aan hom, aan sy waarheid. Can we repeat that? Ek is die weg, die waarheid, die lewe. Johannes 14. I'm the way, the truth, the life. We can know the truth of Jesus by listening to his voice. And I'm learning it. I'm discerning the final, the higher truth of Jesus. I'm unlearning fake truths and lies. Onthou, wie is die vader van die leuen? Satan. En hy saai baie leuns rondom ons. Fake news. And sometimes we attach us to those. Op TikTok kry ons baie fake news. And we have to look at that discerningly. And we have to unlearn a lot of those fake truths. Because they are not worthwhile. Listen to his voice. Discern the final higher truth of Jesus. In combination with walking the way. Following Jesus step by step. By way of habit. Associating myself with him. His body, his church. Being here. Being in step with each other. practicing truth and living the life of Jesus. I'm actively emulating him. Ek is 'n navolger van Jesus. Ek boots hom na. Hy's my rolmodel. I share with others what I received by embracing the love that comes from God with heart and soul. God is liefde. En wie ook al in die liefde bly in God en God bly in hom. God is love. Whoever abides in love abides in God. God abides in him. Aan die begin het ons gevra, wat is die waarheid van Jesus? En ons het gesê, waarheid is iets waardevol. Dis iets uniek. Dis iets betroubaar. Something worthwhile to consider. En dit is wat Jesus se waarheid is. Uniek, betroubaar. En dit is ware liefde. Ware liefde, dit is konkreet. Truth. And what's its equivalent? Wat is gelykstaande aan waarheid? Goddelike liefde. It's not something we possess, but we are possessed by it. We don't control it, but it controls us.